The sound of a billionaire slapping his pregnant wife cracked through the mansion like a gunshot. Outside, the driver heard everything. What Richard Langford didn't know. That driver was Eleanor's brother, a Navy SEAL who'd been documenting abuse for 3 months. When Richard raised his hand again, Noah stepped inside. "She's my sister. Touch her again, and you'll discover what the Navy taught me about cowards." Paparazzi captured everything. The footage went viral. A billionaire's empire collapsed overnight. Then the confession tape leaked Richard's own voice, plotting his wife's destruction. The nation split down the middle. Team Eleanor versus Team Richard. Comment sections erupted. Laws changed. This isn't just about violence. It's about truth, justice, and refusing to stay silent. Drop a comment. Where are you watching from? If you've ever protected someone or needed protection, this story is yours. Because what happens next rewrote history. The crack of palm against cheek tore through the marble foyer like a gunshot. Eleanor stumbled backward, one hand flying to her face, the other clutching her swollen belly. The taste of copper flooded her mouth. Her vision blurred not from tears, but from the shock of realizing her husband had finally crossed the line she'd prayed he'd never reach. Richard Langford stood there, chest heaving, hands still raised. Tech billionaire, philanthropist on magazine covers, monster behind closed doors. "You embarrassed me," he hissed, voice dripping venom. In front of the entire board. Outside, rain drummed against the circular driveway. The valet lights cast long shadows through the windows. Inside the idling black sedan, a man sat perfectly still, hands gripping the leather steering wheel until his knuckles went white. Noah Hayes. 3 months as the Langfords' driver. 3 months of swallowing rage every time he heard raised voices through the intercom. But this scream was different. This one carried his sister's terror. Eleanor's whisper cracked through the silence. "Richard, please. It's our baby. You're scaring." "Our baby?" Richard's laugh was ice. "My legacy, my heir, and you almost destroyed everything with your little speech about ethical responsibility." He stepped closer. Designer shoes clicking against Italian marble. The sound echoed like a countdown. Eleanor pressed against the mahogany banister, trapped between her husband's rage and the winding staircase behind her. Her heart hammered. The baby kicked hard as if sensing the danger wrapping around them both. Through the rearview mirror, Noah's jaw locked. His reflection stared back, calm on the surface, storm beneath. The photo tucked in his wallet burned against his chest. 2 kids on a tire swing. Before money, before monsters, before he'd joined the Navy to escape a world that felt too small. He'd come back for one reason. Her. Richard's voice slithered through the cracked door. "Don't forget whose name you carry, Ellie, or what happens when you make me look weak." Noah's hand moved to the door handle. The rain intensified, hammering the roof like war drums. Some battles don't wait for permission. Drop a comment. Have you ever had to protect someone you love from the person they trusted most? Richard Langford didn't start cruel, he was built that way. Born into Silicon Valley royalty, raised on boardroom power plays, and the belief that money could rewrite any mistake. His father taught him early, control the narrative, control everything. And Eleanor? She was supposed to be the perfect narrative. Beautiful, educated, quiet enough to photograph well at charity galas but smart enough to charm investors. The ideal accessory for a man building an empire on the illusion of ethics. He'd courted her with private jets and handwritten letters. Proposed on a yacht under the kind of sunset that breaks hearts and makes headlines. She'd believed every word, until the ring became a leash. "You think you can speak for this family?" Richard's voice was calm now, the kind of calm that precedes violence. He circled her slowly, predator assessing prey. "You think those bleeding heart board members care about your feelings?" Eleanor's hand trembled against her stomach. "I wasn't speaking against you. I was trying to..." "Trying to what? Sabotage the merger? Make me look soft?" He stopped inches from her face. His breath reeked of bourbon and entitlement. "I've spent 15 years building Langford Technologies. You spent 15 minutes destroying my credibility." She flinched. Not from his words she'd learned to let those slide off like rain on glass, but from the look in his eyes. Cold, calculating, empty. "The baby's due in 6 weeks," she whispered, desperate to find the man she'd married somewhere beneath the monster. "Can't we just—" 6 weeks until the world sees proof that Richard Langford has an heir. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. 6 weeks until you're permanently tied to this family, to me. The threat hung in the air like smoke. Outside, Noah shifted in the driver's seat. The intercom crackled with fragments of conversation, enough to paint the picture he'd been dreading. Richard leaned close to Eleanor's ear. "You'll ruin me before I ruin you, Ellie. Remember that. If you're watching from somewhere you once felt trapped, drop your city below. You're not alone." Noah Hayes was a ghost in plain sight. Pressed uniform, polished shoes, eyes that never lingered too long but missed nothing. The kind of driver wealthy families preferred invisible until needed, silent even when present. But silence was a weapon he'd perfected long before he ever wore a uniform. 12 years in the Navy, 6 as a SEAL. Missions he'd never speak about, scars he'd never explain. He'd learned to move through chaos like water fluid, adaptable, lethal when necessary. Retirement had felt like drowning in slow motion. Then Eleanor's calls stopped. Not all at once. First, the weekly Sunday conversations dwindled to every other week. Then monthly. Then texts that read like hostage notes, brief, sanitized, wrong. "Everything's fine, just busy. Richard's traveling a lot. I'm tired, the pregnancy." Each message landed like a punch he couldn't block. He'd flown out from Virginia without telling her. Applied to Langford's private staffing agency under a different last name, his mother's maiden name, Tucker. Background checks cleared him as former military with an honorable discharge. Nothing flashy, nothing that would raise flags. They'd hired him within 48 hours. For 3 months, he'd watched, waited, documented. Richard's tone when speaking to Eleanor dismissive, cruel, calculated. The way she flinched at sudden movements, like a dog expecting a kick. The bruise on her wrist she'd blamed on clumsiness, even though the finger-shaped marks told a different story. The nights she'd slip into the car with red-rimmed eyes, pretending everything was perfect, while her hands trembled in her lap. Noah's hand tightened on the steering wheel now, knuckles bone-white against black leather. Through the intercom, Richard's voice slithered like oil. "Before I ruin you." The photo in Noah's wallet seemed to pulse. 2 kids, a tire swing, Eleanor's gap-toothed smile, his arms slung protectively over her shoulder. Before their parents died. Before foster care split them apart. Before the world taught them that family was a luxury, not a guarantee. He'd promised her once, blood oath serious, hands clasped in a group home hallway, "I'll always come back." The rain hammered harder against the windshield. Thunder rolled in the distance. Noah's reflection stared back from the rearview mirror patient. Calculating, done waiting. His hand moved toward the door handle. 6 hours earlier, the Langford estate had glittered like a diamond under chandelier light. The annual Langford Technologies Charity Gala. 200 guests in tailored suits and designer gowns, champagne flowing, cameras flashing. The illusion of generosity wrapped in wealth and power. Eleanor had worn emerald silk that night, Richard's choice, always his choice, and smiled until her cheeks ached. She'd perfected the art of being seen but not heard, admired but not acknowledged. Until the keynote speech changed everything. Richard stood at the podium, confident and commanding, announcing Langford Technologies' newest venture, a partnership with Meridian Defense, a military contractor with a questionable human rights record. "Innovation requires bold moves," Richard declared, grin sharp as broken glass. "Progress doesn't wait for the faint of heart." The room erupted in polite applause. Eleanor's stomach twisted. She'd seen the leaked reports 3 days earlier. Child labor allegations, environmental violations, communities displaced without compensation. She'd begged Richard privately to reconsider. He'd laughed in her face. Now, standing beside him on stage for the photo opportunity, microphones still live, Eleanor did something she'd never done before. She spoke. "I believe innovation should serve humanity, not exploit it." Her voice was soft but steady, cutting through the applause like a blade. "Perhaps we should ensure our partnerships reflect the values we claim to champion." The ballroom fell silent. Richard's smile froze. His hand found her wrist beneath the podium grip tight enough to bruise, but the cameras were watching. He couldn't react. Not here, not publicly. He leaned close, lips barely moving. "You just made a terrible mistake." Eleanor's heart hammered, but she held her ground. For once, she'd chosen truth over survival. The board members exchanged glances. Whispers rippled through the crowd like wildfire. Richard's PR director looked ready to faint. In the back of the room, Noah had watched it all unfold. He'd seen the fear flash across Eleanor's face, seen Richard's mask slip for just a fraction of a second. He'd known, even then, how the night would end. The drive home had been silent, suffocating, a storm building behind closed doors. And now, that storm had finally broken. Eleanor's cheek burned like fire. She stood frozen in the foyer, one hand pressed against her face, the other cradling her belly as if shielding her unborn child from the violence already staining their world. Richard stared at his own hand, almost surprised by what he'd done. Almost. Then the surprise vanished, replaced by something worse. Justification. "Look what you made me do," he said quietly, voice cold as January rain. "This is your fault, Ellie. All of it." Outside, paparazzi flashbulbs exploded against the mansion gates like miniature lightning strikes. They'd followed the Langfords home from the gala, hungry for scandal, sensing blood in the water. They had no idea how right they were. Richard moved to the window, yanking the curtains shut with enough force to rip fabric. "No one saw anything. You'll clean yourself up. We'll release a statement about your exhaustion, the pregnancy hormones." Eleanor's voice came out strangled. "You hit me." "I corrected you." He turned, straightening his cufflinks as if violence were just another business transaction. "You embarrassed me in front of investors worth billions. What did you expect? Applause?" She felt something crack inside her, not bone, but something deeper. The last fragile thread of hope that maybe, somehow, the man she'd married still existed beneath the monster. It didn't. The baby kicked hard, as if protesting the nightmare unfolding around them both. Richard stepped closer, voice dropping to a whisper sharp enough to cut. "If you breathe a word of this to anyone, your friends, my staff, the media, I will bury you. Financially, legally. Completely." Eleanor's legs trembled. She gripped the banister tighter. "Do you understand me?" Outside, the sedan's door opened. Rain hissed against hot pavement. Noah's polished shoes hit the driveway with purpose, measured, controlled, inevitable. Richard heard the footsteps approaching. He glanced toward the door, irritation flashing across his face. "Stay in the car," he barked toward the entrance. But Noah was already crossing the threshold. Rain-slicked uniform, spotless, expression unreadable. Their eyes met. Richard's confidence flickered. "Everything all right, sir?" Noah's voice was steady, professional, laced with something dangerous beneath the surface. Richard's jaw tightened. "Stay in your lane, driver. This is family business." Noah's gaze shifted to Eleanor's swollen cheek, tear-streaked face, trembling hands. His voice came out softer, colder. "Yeah, it is." 3 months earlier, Noah had sat across from a woman in a sterile corporate office. Margot Chen, head of Langford Estate Staffing, sharp blazer, sharper questions. "Your resume is impressive, Mr. Tucker." She'd studied him over wire-rimmed glasses. 12 years military service, honorable discharge, impeccable references. Why private driving? Noah had rehearsed the answer 100 times. Wanted something quieter, less complicated. She'd bought it. They always did. Nobody looked past the uniform and the credentials to see the truth underneath. He'd started the following Monday. The first week, he'd kept his distance, professional, detached, invisible. Watched the Langford household like a puzzle he was learning to solve piece by piece. Week 2, He'd installed a discreet recording app on his phone, positioned strategically in the car's center console, legal gray area. He didn't care. By week 3, he'd documented 17 incidents. Richard berating Eleanor over a burned dinner. Richard canceling her doctor's appointments without telling her. Richard monitoring her phone, her emails, her every conversation with the outside world. Control disguised as concern. Abuse wrapped in expensive gifts and hollow apologies. Noah had recorded it all. One night, parked outside a restaurant where the Langfords were dining with investors, Noah had overheard Richard on a phone call through the open window. "If she talks, the board will eat me alive." Richard's voice had been low, venomous. "Eleanor knows too much about the Meridian deal, the offshore accounts, everything." A pause. Then, "No, she won't talk. I'll make sure of it." Noah's blood had turned to ice. That night, he'd called his former SEAL team leader, Marcus Reeves. "I need a favor. Someone monitoring a situation remotely. Full surveillance package." Marcus hadn't asked questions. "You protecting someone or hunting someone?" "Both." The favor had been granted. Within 48 hours, Noah had access to the mansion's security camera feeds, blind spots identified, exit routes memorized, backup plans layered 3 deep. Because in his line of work, you didn't wait for disaster to strike. You prepared for the moment violence became inevitable. And now, standing in Richard Langford's foyer with rain dripping from his uniform, Noah realized that moment had finally arrived. He'd stopped being a driver the second he heard his sister scream. Richard's face twisted with rage. "You dare walk into my home and question me?" He took a step toward Noah, finger jabbing the air like a weapon. "You're staff. You're nothing. Get back in that car before I have security throw you out." Noah didn't move, didn't blink, just stood there, rain pooling at his feet on imported marble, watching a man who'd mistaken money for power his entire life. Eleanor's voice cracked through the tension. "Richard, please, just stop." "Stop?" Richard whirled on her, eyes wild. "I built everything we have. This house, your lifestyle, that baby's future, and you repay me by humiliating me in front of everyone who matters." His hand swept across the entry table, sending a crystal vase crashing to the floor. Shards exploded across marble like frozen rain. Eleanor flinched backward, arms instinctively wrapping around her stomach. A piece of crystal nicked her ankle. Blood beaded against pale skin. Something in Noah's chest went cold and sharp. Richard advanced on her, voice dropping to a hiss. "You think you can leave? You think anyone will believe you over me? I own this city, Eleanor. I own you." "You don't own anyone," Noah said quietly. Richard spun. "What did you say?" "You heard me." Noah's voice was steel wrapped in silk. "Step away from her." "Or what?" Richard's laugh was venom. "You'll what, driver? Hit me? Go ahead. Give me a reason to destroy what's left of your pathetic little life." Eleanor's hand found the banister, knuckles white. "Noah, don't! He'll—" But Noah had already moved closer, positioning himself between Richard and his sister. Not threatening, not aggressive, just immovable. "Last chance," Richard snarled. "Walk away now, or I'll make sure you never work again, anywhere." Noah's jaw tightened. He thought of foster care hallways and blood oath promises, of 12 years learning that some battles couldn't be avoided, only survived. He thought of Eleanor's text messages that read like cries for help disguised as small talk. Then he heard it, Eleanor's sharp intake of breath, Richard's hand rising again. And Noah stopped thinking entirely. Comment below. What would you do if someone you loved was 1 second away from being hurt again? Time slowed to a crawl. Richard's hand arced through the air, aimed at Eleanor's face for the second time tonight. His eyes burned with entitlement, the absolute certainty that consequences were for other people. Noah's body moved on instinct, honed through 1,000 hours of training. His hand shot up, catching Richard's wrist mid-swing. The grip was iron, controlled, unbreakable. Richard's eyes went wide. "What the—" "Don't." Noah's voice was barely a whisper, but it carried the weight of every mission he'd survived, every brother in arms he'd carried home, every promise he'd sworn to keep. For 3 seconds, neither man moved. The mansion seemed to hold its breath. Rain drummed against windows. Somewhere distant, thunder rolled like artillery fire. Richard tried to yank free. Couldn't. His face flushed, red humiliation, mixing with confusion, mixing with something he'd never felt before in his own home. Fear. "Let go of me," he hissed through clenched teeth. Noah's grip tightened fractionally. "Ask nicely. You're fired. You're finished. I'll have you arrested for assault." "Assault would be if I'd hit you back." Noah's tone remained eerily calm. This is just conversation." Eleanor watched, frozen between terror and hope. Her brother, the boy who'd protected her from bullies on playgrounds, who'd written letters from war zones promising he'd come home, stood between her and the monster she'd married. She'd never told him how bad it had gotten, never wanted to burden him with her failures. But he'd known anyway. Somehow, he'd always known. Richard's free hand fumbled for his phone. "Security! Get in here now!" Footsteps thundered down the hallway. 3 security guards burst into the foyer, ex-cops, all of them paid handsomely to look the other way when convenient. They stopped cold when they saw the scene. Their boss, wrist caught in a driver's grip. The driver, standing perfectly still, radiating controlled danger. Mrs. Langford, bleeding and terrified, clutching her pregnant belly. Outside, camera flashes exploded through the curtains, paparazzi sensing something bigger than a charity gala controversy. The lead guard, Torres, hesitated. His hand hovered near his radio. Noah's eyes met his. A silent exchange passed between them, veteran to veteran. Torres had seen combat too, recognized the look of a man who'd crossed a line he couldn't uncross. Noah released Richard's wrist and stepped back slowly. "She's leaving," he said quietly. "Tonight." Richard rubbed his wrist, eyes blazing with fury and disbelief. "You just assaulted me in my own home," he spat, voice shaking. "In front of witnesses. You're done. Finished." Noah stood his ground, rain-soaked uniform clinging to his frame. "Call the police, please." The invitation landed like a grenade. Richard's mouth opened, closed. His brain scrambled for leverage, control, anything to regain the upper hand he'd held for years. Eleanor's voice cut through the chaos, small, but steady. "Noah." He didn't turn. Kept his eyes locked on Richard. "It's time, Ellie." "Time for what?" Richard's voice climbed an octave. "What the hell is this?" Noah finally looked at Eleanor. 12 years of separation, 3 months of silence, a lifetime of protection, all of it visible in that single glance. "Tell him," Noah said gently. Eleanor's hand trembled against her stomach. Tears streaked her face, mixing with rain that had blown through the open door. She'd kept the secret for 3 months, terrified of what Richard would do if he discovered her driver was more than just staff. But secrets had power only in darkness. "He's my brother," she whispered. The words dropped into the room like stones into still water, rippling outward through every person present. Richard's face went from red to white in seconds. "What?" "My brother," Eleanor repeated, louder this time. "Noah Hayes. We were separated in foster care when I was 7. He joined the Navy. I lost track of him for years." Noah pulled the worn photograph from his wallet, 2 kids on a tire swing, arms around each other, gap-toothed smiles frozen in time. He held it up for Richard to see, recognized her the moment her engagement photos hit the news 4 years ago, watched from a distance, figured she'd found her happy ending. His jaw tightened. Then her calls stopped. Her texts got shorter. Vaguer. Wrong. Richard's confidence cracked like thin ice under pressure. The security guards shifted uncomfortably. Torres's hand dropped away from his radio entirely. "So I applied for a job." Noah's voice hardened. "Got hired. Watched. Waited. Documented every threat, every bruise, every time you made her feel small." He stepped closer to Richard, not threatening, just closing distance. "She's my sister," Noah said quietly, each word deliberate as a hammer strike. "And if you think money or lawyers or your pathetic empire will stop me from protecting her, Then you don't understand what family means. Richard's mouth worked soundlessly. Outside, sirens wailed in the distance. Someone, a neighbor, maybe had called 911. Eleanor looked at Noah, tears streaming. "You came back." "Always," he said simply. Richard found his voice again, but it came out strangled. "You're both insane. This is... Over," Noah finished. "Whatever you thought you had, it ends tonight." Richard's shock lasted exactly 4 seconds. Then survival instinct kicked in, the same ruthless calculation that had built his empire from venture capital and crushed competitors without mercy. "You think this changes anything?" His voice steadied, cold boardroom precision returning. "You think anyone will believe a struggling veteran over me? I have lawyers, resources, connections that reach—" "Cameras," Torres interrupted quietly. Everyone turned. The security guard gestured toward the windows, where paparazzi lenses glinted like predator eyes in the darkness. "They've been filming since the gala ended. Every news outlet in the city has vans outside your gates right now, Mr. Langford." Richard's face went ashen. "The curtains were open when you struck Mrs. Langford the first time," Torres continued, voice flat but pointed. "And they've been recording since your driver stepped out of the car." The air seemed to thicken with realization. Noah hadn't needed to throw a punch, hadn't needed to do anything except exist in this moment while the world watched through zoom lenses and live streams. Richard lunged suddenly, not at Noah, but at Eleanor. One last desperate grasp for control, for leverage, for the tool he'd used to maintain his perfect image for 4 years. But Noah's reflexes were faster. He moved like water, stepping between them, catching Richard's arm again. This time, the billionaire swung wild with his other fist. Noah didn't block, didn't dodge, just shifted his weight slightly so Richard's punch glanced off his shoulder, ineffective, panicked, caught on camera. Then Noah swept Richard's legs out from under him with surgical precision. The billionaire crashed to the marble floor, expensive suit crumpling, dignity shattering like the crystal vase he'd smashed minutes earlier. Noah pressed one knee lightly against Richard's chest, just enough to keep him down, not enough to harm. Textbook restraint. "Stay down," Noah said calmly. "Police are 30 seconds out." Eleanor sobbed, not from fear this time, but from something breaking loose inside her chest. Relief, rage, recognition that the nightmare was finally, impossibly ending. Blue and red lights washed through the windows. Car doors slammed. Radio chatter crackled through the rain. Torres stepped forward, hand extended toward Noah. "I'll take it from here, brother." Noah stood slowly, releasing Richard to the security guard's custody. His uniform was soaked, his knuckles unmarked. He hadn't thrown a single punch. Didn't need to. The sirens grew louder. "If someone you care about is trapped, this is your sign. Comment, 'Noticed,' so they know someone sees them." The police entered like a tidal wave, badges, radios, questions fired in rapid succession. 2 officers helped Eleanor to a chair, while a paramedic examined the cut on her ankle and the swelling on her cheek. Camera flashes erupted through every window as paparazzi captured each moment. Richard struggled to his feet, smoothing his ruined suit with shaking hands. "Officers, thank God you're here. This man attacked me." "Sir, we need you to step back." The lead officer, Detective Ava Morales, held up one hand. Her eyes swept the scene with practiced efficiency. Broken crystal, blood spots on marble, Eleanor's injuries, Richard's disheveled state. "He's my employee." Richard's voice climbed desperately. "He assaulted me in my own home. I want him arrested immediately." Morales turned to Torres. "What did you witness?" Torres stood straighter. "Mr. Langford struck his wife. The driver intervened to protect her. Mr. Langford then attempted to assault the driver. Everything's on the security cameras, detective. Time-stamped." Richard's face went purple. "That's not you're fired. All of you." "Funny thing about being fired," Torres said quietly. "Makes a man real honest, real quick." Outside, the media frenzy intensified. News vans multiplied like cells dividing. Reporters shouted questions toward the mansion. Hashtags were already forming in the digital ether. Richard's phone buzzed incessantly in his pocket, texts, calls, notifications exploding one after another. His PR team, his lawyers, board members demanding explanations. He pulled it out with trembling fingers. The screen lit up with dozens of missed calls and a trending Twitter notification, "Number Langford abuse." His face went from purple to gray. "No," he whispered. "No, no, no." Morales stepped closer to Eleanor. "Ma'am, can you tell me what happened tonight?" Eleanor looked at Noah. He nodded once, silent permission, silent promise that he wasn't going anywhere. She took a shaky breath. "My husband hit me for speaking out at his charity gala. My brother stopped him from doing it again." Her voice grew stronger with each word. "This isn't the first time Richard's hurt me, but it's the last." Morales wrote quickly, professionally. "We'll need statements from everyone. Hospital photographs of your injuries, security footage." "It's all yours," Eleanor said. Richard grabbed his phone again, fingers flying across the screen. "I need my lawyer. Now, I'm not saying another word without—" "Smart," Morales said flatly. "You're going to need one." She gestured to her partner. "Read him his rights." The words echoed through the mansion like a death knell. "You have the right to remain silent." Outside, the first live news broadcast went viral within minutes. By sunrise, Richard Langford's world had collapsed. The first domino fell at 2:47 a.m. Meridian Defense issued a statement, terminating their partnership, effective immediately, pending investigation into ethical concerns. 15 minutes later, 3 board members resigned via identical emails, clearly coordinated, clearly final. By 4 a.m., the Langford Technologies stock had dropped 18% in international pre-market trading. Richard sat in a police interrogation room, his $4,000 suit wrinkled and stained, his lawyer whispering furiously in his ear. Through the one-way mirror, Morales watched him unravel in real time. "He keeps checking his phone," her partner observed. "Watching his empire burn," Morales said. "Social media's faster than any courtroom." She wasn't wrong. Twitter had exploded overnight. Justice for Eleanor trended globally within 3 hours. TikTok videos dissected every frame of paparazzi footage, the slap caught through the window, Noah's protective stance, Richard crumpling to the floor. By dawn, investigative journalists had unearthed a pattern. Former Langford Technologies employees came forward with NDAs and stories, hostile work environments, sexual harassment settlements buried in legal paperwork, financial irregularities that suddenly made sense in a darker context. One woman, Kendra Park, posted a video that went viral in 20 minutes. "I worked for Richard Langford for 2 years. He fired me when I refused to falsify environmental impact reports. Tonight, watching him get arrested? That's called karma." The comments flooded in by the thousands. Eleanor sat in a hospital room, exhausted but awake, Noah beside her in a plastic chair. A nurse had checked the baby heartbeat strong, everything stable despite the trauma. A detective had taken her statement, photographed her injuries, offered resources, shelters, counseling, legal advocates. Eleanor had accepted them all. Now, her phone buzzed with messages from people she hadn't heard from in years. Friends Richard had systematically isolated her from, her college roommate, her former co-workers, even her estranged aunt. All of them saying the same thing: "We're here, we believe you, you're not alone." Noah's phone buzzed too. A text from Marcus Reeves: "Saw the news? You good?" Noah typed back, "Getting there." On the hospital TV mounted in the corner, a morning news anchor spoke over footage of the Langford mansion surrounded by police tape. Shocking allegations against billionaire philanthropist Richard Langford continue to emerge this morning. His charity foundation has suspended operations, and multiple sponsors have withdrawn support. Eleanor reached for Noah's hand. "Thank you," she whispered. He squeezed back. "You saved yourself, Ellie. I just showed up." "You always do." 48 hours later, Noah drove Eleanor down Highway 1 toward the coast. No mansion, no marble floors, No cameras waiting at every corner. Just asphalt, ocean wind, and the kind of silence that comes after surviving a war. Eleanor sat in the passenger seat of Noah's old pickup truck, a far cry from the luxury sedans she'd grown accustomed to. Her overnight bag held 3 changes of clothes, prenatal vitamins, and the tire swing photograph Noah had kept all these years. Everything else had been left behind. Rain misted across the windshield. Gray clouds hung low over the Pacific, but somehow the gloom felt cleaner than the pristine mansion ever had. "You okay?" Noah asked, eyes on the road. Eleanor touched her belly, feeling the baby shift. "I don't know yet. Ask me in a month." They'd checked into a small coastal motel under Noah's name, the Seabreeze Inn, paint peeling, neon sign flickering, absolutely perfect. 2 rooms, cash payment, no questions asked. Eleanor sat on the edge of the sagging mattress, staring at her phone. Hundreds of messages. Interview requests from journalists. Statements from Richard's legal team, calling her emotionally unstable and vindictive. She powered it off and set it aside. "I should have left years ago," she said quietly. Noah leaned against the doorframe. "You left when you could. That's what matters." "I stayed because I thought," her voice cracked. "I thought if I was just better, quieter, more perfect, he'd stop. That the man I married would come back." "He was never there, Ellie." She nodded, tears slipping free. "I know that now." Outside, waves crashed against rocks. Seagulls cried overhead. The world kept turning, indifferent to the wreckage of one woman's marriage. But Eleanor felt something shift inside her, not quite hope, not yet, but the absence of fear. The space where terror had lived for years suddenly emptied out, leaving room for something new. Noah handed her a cup of tea from the motel's small kitchenette. "You shouldn't have come back for me," she whispered. He sat beside her on the bed, shoulder to shoulder like they'd done as kids in group homes when the world felt too big and too cruel. "Family doesn't leave family," he said simply. Eleanor rested her head against his shoulder. The baby kicked gentle, persistent, alive. "What happens now?" she asked. Noah looked out the rain-streaked window at the gray ocean beyond. "Now, we figure it out. Together." Eleanor filed charges on a Tuesday morning. Domestic violence, assault, intimidation. The legal terms felt clinical, sterile, nothing like the lived reality of fear that had shaped her world for years. But the district attorney's office had enough evidence to prosecute twice over. Security footage, hospital records, witness testimony from Torres and 2 other staff members who'd finally found their courage. And then there were the recordings. Noah had handed over 3 months of audio, Richard's threats, manipulation, control disguised as concern. Every word time-stamped, catalogued, undeniable. The DA had smiled grimly. "Mrs. Langford, this is one of the strongest cases I've seen in 20 years." By Wednesday, the story had exploded beyond social media into mainstream news cycles. CNN ran a special segment, "The Langford Case, When Wealth Can't Buy Silence." The New York Times published an investigative piece detailing Richard's pattern of abuse not just with Eleanor, but through his entire corporate history. Employees threatened into silence, women paid off with NDAs, whistleblowers destroyed professionally. The article included interviews with 12 people. 12 voices finally heard. By Thursday, Eleanor's inbox overflowed with messages from strangers, survivors sharing their own stories, thanking her for speaking up, telling her she'd given them permission to do the same. One email stood out. From a woman named Sophia Chen, former Langford Technologies executive. "He fired me when I was 6 months pregnant because I questioned his accounting practices, threatened to blacklist me from the industry if I spoke out. I stayed silent for 5 years, watching you fight back. You freed all of us. Thank you." Eleanor read it 3 times, tears blurring the screen. On Friday, Richard released a video apology from his lawyer's office. He wore a navy suit, softer, more humble than his usual armor. His voice trembled perfectly. "I recognize I've made mistakes. I'm committed to getting help, to being better." But viewers weren't buying it. The comments section flooded with skepticism. Crisis Management 101. Where's this energy when cameras weren't watching? Too little, too late. Someone had leaked a still image from the video, Richard checking his phone mid-recording, face blank with calculation rather than remorse. It went viral within an hour. The mask slipped one final time, and the world saw exactly what Eleanor had survived behind closed doors. A man incapable of genuine accountability, performing contrition while plotting damage control. By Saturday, 3 more women had come forward with their own allegations against Richard Langford. The reckoning wasn't just Eleanor's anymore. It was collective, unstoppable, long overdue. The footage arrived anonymously. A USB drive, mailed to 3 major news outlets simultaneously. No return address, no note, just raw security camera files from inside the Langford mansion, weeks of footage the police hadn't yet subpoenaed. Someone with access had decided the truth needed to move faster than the legal system. Marcus Reeves called Noah at 6 a.m. Check the news, now. Noah turned on the motel TV. Eleanor emerged from her room, drawn by the urgency in his voice. On screen, Anderson Cooper's face was grave. We want to warn viewers that the following footage contains disturbing content. Then the video played. Richard, in his study, on a phone call 3 weeks before the gala. Voice calm, calculated. Eleanor's becoming a liability. She's asking too many questions about the Meridian accounts. If she talks to the board. A pause. Then, no, I'll handle it. She won't leave. She's too invested in the image. And if she tries, a cold laugh. Well, accidents happen. Especially to pregnant women. Eleanor's hand flew to her mouth. The footage cut to another scene. Richard and his lawyer in the mansion library, day after the assault. We paint her as unstable. Postpartum psychosis starting early. Emotional, irrational. The brother's a violent vet with PTSD, that's our angle. His lawyer nodded. And the recordings? Inadmissible without consent, and even if they surface, we spin it. She was recording me to build a false case, premeditated. The news anchor returned, visibly shaken. The source of this footage has not been identified, but forensic analysis confirms authenticity. The Langford legal team declined to comment. Eleanor sank onto the bed, trembling. He was planning. He was going to. Noah sat beside her, jaw tight. He was never going to let you leave. The USB contained 17 clips total. Richard discussing ways to neutralize Eleanor's growing independence. Richard instructing staff to monitor her movements, her calls, her online activity. Richard researching legal precedents for invalidating prenuptial agreements through mental incompetence claims. And one final clip that broke the internet. Richard, alone in his study after the arrest, whispering to himself, "She'll crack. They all do. Money and patience, that's all it takes." By noon, number confession tape was trending globally. Richard's remaining sponsors fled like rats from a sinking ship. His charity board disbanded entirely. Former business partners issued statements condemning him in language carefully crafted by their own legal teams. Detective Morales held a press conference. New evidence has come to light that significantly strengthens the case against Richard Langford. We're pursuing additional charges, including conspiracy and witness intimidation. Eleanor watched it all unfold on the small motel TV, Noah's hand in hers. "The world sees him now," Noah said quietly. "Really sees him." Eleanor nodded, tears streaming, not from fear this time. From relief, from validation, from the knowledge that she'd never have to prove her truth again. It was recorded, time-stamped, undeniable. The monster had confessed to his crimes himself. Richard Langford's empire didn't crumble, it imploded. Within 72 hours of the confession tape's release, Langford Technologies' stock became worthless. Trading halted. Shareholders filed lawsuits. The SEC launched an investigation into financial irregularities that suddenly made horrifying sense. The mansion went up for sale, emergency liquidation to cover mounting legal fees. His penthouse in Manhattan, seized by creditors. His private jet, grounded, repossessed. His art collection, wine cellar, vintage car garage, all auctioned off piece by piece, while cameras documented every lot number, every falling gavel. The man who'd built an empire on image watched it dissolve in real time from a modest apartment his lawyers had secured 23rd floor. Decent view, utterly anonymous. No staff, no security, no Eleanor. Just Richard and the consequences he'd spent a lifetime believing money could erase. He sat on a leather couch, one of the few possessions he'd managed to keep staring at his laptop screen. Twitter, Reddit, Instagram. Every platform showed the same thing. His face paired with words like abuser, predator, monster. Memes mocked him. Comment sections dissected his every past interview, finding new evidence of manipulation in old footage. Think pieces analyzed the psychology of wealthy men who believed accountability was negotiable. His phone, a cheap burner now, the luxury model confiscated as evidence, remained silent. No calls from former friends, no texts from business associates. The network he'd cultivated for decades had evaporated overnight, everyone desperate to distance themselves from the scandal. Richard opened his email. One new message from his lead attorney. Richard, the DA, is offering a plea deal, 7 years minimum, possibility of parole after 5 with good behavior. It's the best offer we'll get. The alternative is trial, and with the confession tape, we'll lose. Badly. Advise you accept. Sterling. 7 years. 5 with good behavior. Richard laughed, a hollow, broken sound that echoed through the empty apartment. He'd turned 52 last month. By the time he walked free, he'd be nearly 60. No company, no reputation, no legacy beyond cautionary tales and true crime podcasts. Everything he'd built gone. Everyone he'd controlled free. He closed the laptop and stared at the wall, seeing nothing. Outside, the city hummed with life, people working, loving, surviving, without ever knowing or caring that Richard Langford existed. Anonymity, he realized, was the cruelest punishment of all. He'd spent his entire life demanding to be seen, feared, respected. Now the world had looked directly at him and chosen to look away in disgust. Drop karma in the comments if you believe some falls are earned. Richard rejected the plea deal. His new legal team, smaller, cheaper, desperate for publicity, convinced him he could still win, charm the jury, play the sympathetic husband driven to a momentary lapse by stress and business pressures. The trial began on a cold November morning. Eleanor sat in the front row of the courtroom, 8 months pregnant now, Noah beside her. She wore a simple navy dress, no designer labels, no jewelry except her mother's old wedding band she'd retrieved from storage. Across the aisle, Richard sat in a tailored suit that didn't quite fit anymore. He'd lost weight. His hair had grayed at the temples. But his eyes still carried that calculating gleam, the belief that he could manipulate his way out of this. The prosecution opened with the security footage. The slap, caught in crystal-clear 4 Kelvin's resolution, Eleanor's cry. Richard's cold response. The jury watched in complete silence, 12 faces hardening with each passing second. Then came the confession tape. Richard's voice, clinical and cruel. Accidents happen, especially to pregnant women. A woman in the jury box visibly flinched. The defense tried to paint Eleanor as vindictive, unstable, opportunistic, a woman who'd married for money and now sought to destroy her husband's reputation for a larger divorce settlement. Eleanor's attorney, a sharp woman named Patricia Nguyen, dismantled the argument methodically. Mrs. Langford signed a prenuptial agreement that left her with almost nothing if the marriage ended. Patricia stated clearly, she gains no financial benefit from these proceedings. What she gains is her life back. Torres testified. 3 former staff members testified. The paramedic who treated Eleanor's injuries testified. Then Eleanor took the stand. She spoke for 40 minutes, calm, direct, unflinching, described years of escalating abuse, the isolation from friends and family, the monitoring of her phone and email, the threats disguised as concern for her well-being. "Did you love your husband?" Patricia asked gently. Eleanor's voice cracked slightly. I loved who I thought he was, the man he pretended to be. And who was he really? Eleanor looked directly at Richard. Someone who needed control more than he needed love. Richard stared back, jaw tight, mask finally slipping. The defense cross-examined aggressively, trying to provoke her, trip her up, make her seem emotional or irrational. Eleanor remained steady. Every answer matched the evidence, every detail corroborated by witnesses. When she stepped down, the courtroom felt heavier somehow, the weight of truth finally spoken aloud without fear. Closing arguments took 3 hours. The jury deliberated for 90 minutes. When they returned, the forewoman stood. On the charge of domestic violence, assault, guilty. On the charge of witness intimidation, guilty. On the charge of criminal threatening, guilty. Richard's face went blank. Eleanor exhaled a breath she'd been holding for years. 3 weeks after the verdict, Eleanor went into labor. 2:17 a.m. The coastal motel had long since become home. Noah had rented a small beach house nearby, close enough to help, but far enough to give her space to rebuild. He got the call and arrived at the hospital in 12 minutes, breaking at least 3 traffic laws. Eleanor gripped his hand through contractions, sweat beading on her forehead, eyes focused with the same determination she'd shown on the witness stand. "You've got this," Noah said quietly between breaths. "You've survived worse." She laughed, strained but genuine. "This is different." "Yeah. This time you're bringing life into the world instead of escaping death." 7 hours later, a cry pierced the delivery room. Small, fierce, insistent. The nurse placed the baby on Eleanor's chest, tiny fists, scrunched face, lungs that worked perfectly despite everything his mother had endured while carrying him. "It's a boy," the doctor announced, smiling. Eleanor's tears came instantly, soaking into the hospital gown, mixing with the overwhelming rush of love and relief and terror, and hope that accompanies every first breath. "Hey there," she whispered, voice breaking. "I'm your mom. We made it." Noah stood beside the bed, watching his sister transform into something stronger than she'd ever been. A mother, a survivor, a woman who'd walked through fire and carried her child safely to the other side. "Does he have a name?" the nurse asked gently. Eleanor looked at Noah. "I was thinking, Echo." Noah's breath caught. Echo, his Navy call sign. The name his SEAL team had given him because he always came back for his brothers. Because he never left anyone behind. "You sure?" His voice was rough. Positive. Eleanor smiled through tears. Echo Hayes. Because some voices carry forever. Because family always answers. The baby Echo yawned and nestled closer to his mother's heartbeat. Outside the hospital window, dawn broke over the Pacific. Soft gold light spilled across the water, painting everything in warmth. Noah pulled out his phone and took a photo. Eleanor and Echo, backlit by sunrise, the beginning of a story that didn't include violence or fear or men who mistook control for love. Just a mother and son, an uncle keeping watch. A family rebuilt from scattered pieces. The baby kicked one tiny foot against Eleanor's side, the same fierce kicks she'd felt through months of uncertainty. But now those kicks meant something different. Not distress, not warning, just life, insisting on itself. Stubborn and beautiful and entirely free. 6 months later, Eleanor sat in a corner booth at Rosie's Diner, coffee steaming in a chipped ceramic mug. Echo slept in a carrier beside her, tiny chest rising and falling with the peaceful rhythm only infants possess. Outside the salt-stained windows, waves rolled against the breakwater in endless repetition. Noah slid into the booth across from her, hair still damp from an early morning run. He'd taken a job with a private security firm, consulting work, training new recruits, nothing that required him to leave for months at a time. Family came first now. "Sleep last night?" he asked, already knowing the answer from the shadows under her eyes. 3 hours. 4 if you count the time I spent watching him breathe to make sure he was still alive. Noah smiled. "That ever stop?" "Probably never." The waitress Rosie herself, 60-something with kind eyes and zero tolerance for nonsense, refilled their coffee without asking. She'd adopted Eleanor and Noah as regulars within the first week, asking no questions about where they'd come from or why. Some people just recognized survivors when they saw them. The diner's TV played quietly in the corner, morning news flickering across the screen. A segment about new domestic violence legislation caught Eleanor's attention, commonly referred to as the Langford Act, the reporter explained. Requires mandatory training for law enforcement on recognizing patterns of coercive control. The bill, which passed with bipartisan support, was inspired by the high-profile case of Eleanor Langford Hayes. Eleanor set down her mug carefully. Noah noticed. "You okay?" She nodded slowly. "I spent years thinking I was the only one, that if I just kept quiet, kept trying, it would eventually get better. And now every cop in the state gets trained on what coercive control looks like. Now victims have language for what's happening to them." Her voice steadied. "Richard tried to erase me. Instead, I got written into law." Echo stirred, making small sounds. Eleanor lifted him from the carrier, cradling him against her shoulder. "You changed things, Ellie," Noah said quietly. She looked out at the ocean gray today, moody, beautiful in its honesty. No pretense, no performance, just water being exactly what it was. "I survived," she corrected. "And maybe that's enough." "It's more than enough." Rosie appeared with plates of scrambled eggs and toast. "On the house today. Honorable saw you on the news last week. That interview you did? My daughter left her husband because of it. 30 years she stayed. Your story gave her permission to go." Eleanor's eyes filled. "Is she safe?" "Safe and thriving. Started over at 53. Rosie squeezed Eleanor's shoulder. "You did that." After Rosie walked away, Eleanor whispered to Echo, "Maybe the world isn't as cruel as it used to be." The baby yawned against her neck, unconvinced but content. Sunrise came early to the coast that morning. Noah stood on the beach, coffee in hand, watching the horizon turn from indigo to amber to gold. The Pacific stretched endless before him, constant, indifferent, healing in its vastness. Behind him, the beach house windows glowed warm. Eleanor was inside, probably feeding Echo, probably singing softly the way she did when she thought no one was listening. His phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. "Job offer. 6 months in Dubai. High-profile client. Your call." Noah looked at the message for a long moment, then deleted it. Some chapters close. Some missions end. He'd spent 12 years protecting strangers in countries whose names he couldn't always pronounce. Had saved lives, lost brothers, carried scars that would never fully heal. But this standing watch over his sister and nephew while they rebuilt a life free from fear, this was the mission that mattered most. Eleanor appeared on the porch, Echo bundled against the morning chill. She waved. Noah waved back. He thought about the night everything changed. The rain, the slap, the choice to step out of that car instead of staying invisible. There'd been no manual for that moment, no protocol. Just instinct honed by years of knowing when silence was complicity. Noah walked back toward the house, sand cool beneath his bare feet. Inside, Eleanor had breakfast waiting, nothing fancy, just pancakes and scrambled eggs, but made with the kind of care that only exists when cooking for family. "Big plans today?" she asked, settling Echo in his high chair. "Thought I'd teach the kids some hand-to-hand combat basics." Eleanor laughed. "He's 6 months old. Never too early to start." Noah grinned, then softened. "Actually, I was thinking we could drive up the coast. There's a lighthouse about an hour north, supposed to be beautiful. I'd like that." They ate in comfortable silence, the kind that only comes when words aren't necessary, when simply existing in each other's presence is enough. After breakfast, Noah stepped outside to his truck, no longer a chauffeur's sedan. Just a weathered pickup that had seen better days but ran like a dream. He caught his reflection in the driver's side window. No uniform, no orders, no mansion gates or marble floors or men who thought power came from cruelty. Just a man who'd kept a promise made in a group home hallway 20 years ago. "I'll always come back." He had, and he'd stay as long as they needed him. Noah climbed into the truck, started the engine, and waited for Eleanor and Echo to join him. The sun climbed higher, painting everything in light that felt earned rather than given. Justice hadn't erased the pain. Time wouldn't erase the scars. But they'd rewritten the ending together, stubborn, free. Because sometimes heroes don't wear uniforms anymore. Sometimes they just drive the getaway car. And sometimes that's exactly enough. If this story made you feel something, hit subscribe. Because everyone deserves a protector. Everyone deserves to be believed. And every voice, including yours, deserves to be heard.